When in doubt, breathe. Stress is just inevitable for us as humans. You can always have 2 minutes to start something, but the key word is movement. There's something about what happens in your brain when you start to worry and kind of stay still, you're not engaging other parts of your body. When you start to engage in some active movement, it just starts to shift your focus, just to allow the thoughts to take place without you judging the thoughts. Really find that space. And this is where you just do it for a minute. It's a practice.
Hello, amazing moms. And this is Dr. Chen. I'm with Michael Conti. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Dr. Chen.
Well, today we're going to talk about a topic I think is on a lot of people's mind, which is stress. Life is just full of stress. And if you're a mom listening to our podcast, if you're raising a child with special need or just raising any child, I think every day we're faced with stress. Stress is something that we can't get rid of. Our life is just full of it. And I don't know a single person who say their life does not have stress. So today we're going to talk about how to manage it effectively and with the practical tools you can start using right now. So, Michael, the first question is, how are you feeling now? I'm just wondering, like, how you felt about stress as you travel around doing the digital nomading.
You said it best. Stress is just inevitable for us as humans. And although we're talking about specifically special needs, especially with young kids, I think it's just realizing that there is no getting rid of stress. It's in all throughout human history, we've had to deal with stress, whether we were running from lions and tigers, whether we didn't have enough food to eat, whether the water wasn't safe. And now in this digital world, that still exists. And I think that's important because if we feel that we are the only ones going through stress, we kind of feel isolated in the process. This is just something of not how to eliminate stress. It's really about how do we process it, manage it, and have a little buffer. So for me, I kind of think from that standpoint. How can I process this feeling that I'm feeling versus how can I get rid of it? Allows me to do things which we'll talk about today, whether it's through my spirit, whether it's through my body, whether it's through my mind, to have a good process system so that I look at stress not as a detriment, but as a field that I can use for growth.
Love it. It's avoidance versus face the stress in a more productive way.
Yes. And I think that's what we need to do is to realize because it's inevitable, we have choices on how we want to work through it. And by all means, this is not an easy task. So it's not a
Mhm.
wave a magic wand and all of a sudden your stress goes away. We're trying to talk about is how do we build the process of taking this stress and not have it being internalized. So the analogy that I like to use is there's a lot of parents that we're kind of all just one big tea kettle. And what happens if we keep just absorbing all of our energy, not letting it out productively, our tea kettle just starts to it already start off simmering in the morning. And then we have these tea kettle blowups. And we all know when a tea kettle gets too hot, it's just spewing out hot water everywhere and affects everyone around. I think a lot of parents get into that mode. So it's really saying, how can we make sure that our tea kettle doesn't start off hot as we wake up in the morning? So we have this buffer that we can go about making sure that we can control the water versus just having it spew all over the place.
I can think of myself as a tea kettle sometimes. It's the journey of being a parent. And a lot of times you're just like, can you just leave me alone? Or you start to shout at your kid and you're like, oh man, I feel so bad. I shouted at you. But at that moment, you were boiling. There are so many times I felt like I could have handled much better and not be the tea kettle and be able to release some of the pressure ahead of the time. Like you said, Michael, it's so easier said than being done. At that moment, your brain is just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe what's happening. Why do you have to behave this way? Why do you have to bang your head? Why can't you just use your word? And when we just start to have that kind of narratives, like almost like very negative narratives day in and day out, that's when the kettle boils.
Yeah. So when you talking about the brain, and definitely we're both not neuroscience experts, but that's the amygdala. That's that fight or freeze or fight mode, and it just gets hijacked. It's the same reason when road rage happens, all of a sudden you get like blinders. All you do is see red and frustrated. So let's just talk about the acute. So I guess the first segment is when you start to feel the red, when you can feel that your kettle's about to blow, what are some quick acute tools to kind of help with. And the first one that comes to me, and I think this is standard for all of us, is always your breath. You always have it with you. You can never leave it. And by engaging in any breathing techniques, one of them is called box breathing. And so you kind of breathe in a box, you breathe for 4 seconds, you hold for 4 seconds, you breathe out for 4 seconds, and you hold, is called box breathing. There's many other types, but while you're doing it, it's lowering your heart rate and your blood pressure. Because that's essentially, we always talk about these tools, but almost everything's connected to biology. And so when you feel your T kettle rising, literally that breathing is like turning down the thermostat. And it allows you to think a logical thought before you just spew out all the frustration of what's taking place. So I always think that's the best place to start. When in doubt, breathe. From your standpoint, when you think of acute tools, what kind of pops into mind for you?
I just put on the YouTube and then type in 5 minutes yoga. And
Oh,
having that, I found it to be really helpful to me that I can just follow someone, really like imitate the back to the power of imitation and saw someone doing the yoga and 5 minutes. I'll just start to do that for 5 minutes. And a lot of the times what I found out is I felt much more calm, especially in the evening, like a lot of parents are who are listening to the podcast. I think by the time we get home from work, we really don't have any energy left for our kids, for our family, for our loved ones. And you're just ready to lay down and take a nap. And many of us, I think, we're like try not to, lay on the bed because we know that we're gonna fall asleep if we do that. And to reset, what I do is I just do 5 minutes yoga, stretching exercise, and then be ready to go again. And also I try to schedule this small chunk of prayer time and reading time. I keep a journal, and every day when I get up in the morning, I just, spend that 10 minutes to read a small God's words. And you can read any book you like to and just have that routine, write down some things that strike you at that moment. So two things, 5 minutes yoga, and then have the routine of reading a brief thing, passage, and write it down what I read.
so what I heard there a lot is that you did a focus shift and you, although you could still be stressed out, it doesn't go away. I think allowing your brain to focus intently on something else helps it kind of simmer down the tension that you're feeling. Instead of, why is this happening? What can I do? It's just saying, I'm going to engage in yoga, or I'm going to just dance. I'm going to crank up some music, my favorite music, and just kind of dance and try to vibe out for a little bit. And I think that that is a really important distinction. And there's so many different ways to do that. But engaging in your senses, your auditory senses, this is where for some people, it could just be kind of just writing out their thoughts. So instead of screaming them out, take out a journal. And if you want to use 1,000 cuss words in the journal, by all means, you're still getting the energy out in a useful way, because that's what that process, by just swallowing energy time after time, it just leads to more difficulties. Even from, my previous journey, for someone who used to swallow so much of the stress, it will come back. It doesn't go away. I'm a big believer that, just using physics, energy is not created or destroyed. It just gets transferred. If I just keep absorbing the energy, eventually it feels like it's compacted inside of me. So I like these kind of acute tools, that we can give someone, right off the bat. One additional one to consider is sometimes even scheduling the time to worry, which is such an interesting thing to kind of think about. But what it's saying is, we're not saying you should avoid why something happened, or the uncertainty of what's going to happen tomorrow, or are you going to find the right provider, or is this school going to help you out? But by scheduling the worry time, it makes it so that it has its focus, and it's not a 24/7 activity. Unfortunately, for both of us who've worked with lots of parents, we kind of see parents engaged kind of in a 24/7 worry activity. And that, it's very draining, which we hear all the time. But let's think about that from a neurological perspective. You're just burning a lot of chemical energy in these thoughts. And many of these thoughts, although valid, are really trying to anticipate a future that none of us will know. So instead of thinking about the present on, what are the most important 3 things I need to do right now, our brains want to wander off on what's going to happen 5, 10, 20 years down the road. And I think we're missing the opportunity to solve the present to better prepare for the future that you want.
I think the key message here really is you kind of acknowledge the stress is there and the worry is there. There are a lot of things that on your mind, but schedule the time and have that time and say, okay, there's I noticed that there are a lot of things I need to do. I need to start to teach my child imitation. I start to think about how to reach out, get myself a support social network, and I need to find out what are the school options for my kids. All those stresses, all those worries will always be there. You can't fight it, you can't ignore it. And as Michael said, that the take home message is schedule the time for the worry time and also use the quick technique like 2 minutes breathing. Write it down your thoughts, even have the attention shift, stretch, yoga, whatever for 2 or 3 minutes, and so that your brain can just ride over the wave and then bring back that peace in your heart. One thing I think is very important for me is knowing that the stress is there. You just cannot ignore it. I think of it as like, say, if you have a canker sore in your mouth, and then I tell you, just ignore it, pretend it doesn't exist. It's the same thing to saying, well, just pretend the sun is not existing there. Just live your day. It's not possible, right? You go out, it's a daytime, it's hot. And you try to talk, oh my gosh, the canker sore hurts. And all the pains, all the stress, it's there. We cannot make it go away. It will not go away. But what we can do is to choose how to manage it, how to respond to it. Someone said something like, I don't exactly remember the exact word. It goes like, you cannot decide the wave, but you can decide how to surf it.
I love that. It is going with the flow, right? You're not going to beat the ocean. So I
Mm-mm.
think the more you know how to ride the surfboard, even if it gets bumpy, and then we all have to practice it. And so I think just recognizing we're all doing it. Sometimes the game is on hard mode. We fully admit sometimes it's challenging, but it's still the same activity on how do you ride that wave. So I definitely love that analogy.
It give a kind of reminder for us that how we should respond to the stress. Well, the first take home message is thinking about your stress is like a tea kettle. Don't let it boil to a point that you just cannot bring down the temperature anymore. So think about the 2 minutes breathing, think about scheduling worry time, and thinking about that you cannot ignore it, but you can choose how to surf the wave. That's going to our second segment. We're going to talk about different areas of stress relief, the mind, the body, focus. Michael, talk to us about what kind of physical activities have helped you feel less stressed over the years.
So I love this because now we're trying to break it down because everyone's a little bit different, but we're trying to give enough opportunities. So yes, let's just start with body. And I'm just a big believer that movement itself is energy. Humans were always meant to move. This is probably the less we've moved in our entire species. So I said first, when in doubt, breathe and or walk. Literally, if you need to, and we kind of do that. That's why people pace. And so it's a kind of a natural thing, but pace with purpose is how I think about it. So it's trying to schedule walks. And if you can't go far, schedule a place in the apartment where you can kind of engage in some physical activity. It could be walking, it could be yoga, it could be stretching, it could be dancing. But the key word is movement. There's something about what happens in your brain when you start to worry and kind of stay still, you're not engaging other parts of your body. And when you start to engage in some active movement, it just starts to shift your focus. And if you have the opportunity, it is hard to worry when you're jogging. It's hard to worry when you're on a hike because your brain has to allocate its mental energy towards what you're taking place. And I think that's why yoga has so much value. If you're going to hold the tree pose, it's hard to
Mhm.
think about the stresses of your day. So it's your opportunity to find something within the home and outside the home that uses your body to shift focus and keep experimenting is the things that I am experimenting with. And I've seen lots of value.
That is so true. I think I can do like breathing, and sometimes my mind wanders, but I've never felt like I can do plank at the same time, worry about my to-do list for that day.
Plank your stress away.
That's right.
Is one way to look at it. And you get an extra thing, right? You get to increase your core and reduce your thoughts. So you could get to kill two birds with one stone.
And the brain just cannot do both at the same time.
So those are kind of the ones with body. For those who feel adventurous, there's lots of research that cold water, in terms of cold shower, splashing cold water in your face, also helps your brain. It kind of stimulates, some of the neurocircuitry. So that could be also a way to use your body as a way to quickly de-stress.
What can a parent do if the parent think like, oh my gosh, take 10 minutes walk. I don't even have 2 minutes to brush my teeth.
I know we're big fans of the fight for 15 minutes. So I think trying to expand, but let's just take, let's find 2 minutes. And so, in my opinion, you can always have 2 minutes to start something. And I think that's a mindset that is necessary. Because if we feel that we can't start anything, that really puts us in a position of being disempowered. And of course, the goal is what is the best use of my next 2 minutes? I can scream, I can cry, which sometimes is very cathartic. I can breathe, or I can listen to a first half of a song I like. And that shifts your brain from a passive, this is happening to me state versus an action step. And I think to me, that's the key purpose.
Mhm.
Intent of action at least allows that you feel you have the sense of control. Although most of us, it's hard to get any sense of control in this world. So that's the kind of the recommendation is just decide to take the breath. Decide just to walk in a room and scream in the pillow, but make the choice to do it. I think helps you to kind of feel the ownership on what you choose to do next.
It's really the two process, right? Like the first one is the bottom up. You're trying to responding to any stimulus in your environment automatically. Your child is screaming, you want to scream, and you did scream, and then you felt sorry. The other one you described is the top-down process saying, I notice I'm mad right now. I notice that I'm boiling. What are the things I can do in the next 2 minutes to counteract that? I can take 2 minutes deep breath. I can just pull out my phone, listen to a song, and for 2 minutes to de-stress and then come back. And that's your top-down approach. Actually, you pause and then asking your brain, okay, I'm stressed right now, but there's something I can do in these 2 minutes. And let me try some of that techniques.
And you need all the tools, right? Top down, bottom up, circular. So that kind of brings us to the mind. How do we get our mind to calm down? Because that's where it feels like it's a racehorse. It feels like your brain is going 100 miles a minute. So this is where the concept of meditation, takes place. And I think sometimes meditation is this loaded word. You don't have to sit with your eyes closed in a calm environment, a Zen monk. I think it's just allowing yourself just to allow the thoughts to take place without you judging the thoughts. Because what we're doing a lot when we have that negative feedback loop is we're just judging the thoughts. If the voice in your head keeps asking you why questions, whys tend to be judgmental questions. Instead of asking, why did this happen? Maybe ask yourself, what could I do next time? It still gets you to observe the situation, but what gives you what should I do versus why starts to assign blame. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of moms are assigning blame to themselves unnecessarily for things that are taking place. So, really find that space. And this is where you just do it for a minute. It's a practice, but find yourself, okay, yes, I feel very angry right now, which is healthy to feel all your thoughts. I don't believe in toxic positivity. I believe that we should feel how we feel, but meditation is allowing us to observe those thoughts without drowning in the thoughts. And so I think from a mind standpoint, it's very powerful to practice that just a couple minutes a day so that when you feel that tea kettle rising, you have a way to pull yourself out and control your thermostat versus just letting it go wherever it wants.
Again, is the attention shift. You'll shift your attention from some event that stress you out and then to be present at that moment.
This conversation is starting to become a lot about how do we shift focus. Meditation's about shifting focus, breathing, all these activities. Maybe that's kind of the underpinning activity when it comes to stress is how can I make sure that I don't sit in this energy? I can shift my energy through my focus so that it can actually process it in a useful way. And that even goes into visualization. Even just closing your eyes and visualizing the outcome that you want doesn't guarantee that it will solve everything, but now it lets your brain think about what can be done versus what just took place. So, what we're talking about here is thinking about the positive future of action versus always thinking about what has happened in the past that can't be changed. I think goes into that mental mind shift of, yes, this has sucked. I can't find a good provider. I'm struggling with my school district to get me the services that I need. And then it's trying to visualize, okay, what does success look like just for tomorrow? What does success look like in the near future? Instead of 10 years down the road, it's thinking, what can we do to optimize the next 3 days? I think helps us start to narrow the focus and then still engage in that focus shift.